Well, we have off-season news involving the Timberwolves and their front office. We also want to talk about something interesting Jason Tatum said. Talk about the Minnesota Lynx, who have been spectacular, stunningly spectacular. And we also have a really good Twitter question about a journalistic icon. I hate the word icon. Journalistic legend, let's say that. Also, we want to get into something interesting that Chris Finch said recently about his offense. Let's get into all that and more here on the Jon Krawczynski Show. Yes, starring Jon Krawczynski from The Athletic. I'm Jim Souhan from the Star Tribune. This is our basketball show at talknorth.com. Best way to listen to this show or any show on the network. Subscribe to your favorite podcast app. It's free. It's the easiest way to listen. We're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studios. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, Princeton's Liquors, True Vision Institute, TSR Injury Law, and Shepherd Good and Lamb Chops Clothing Line. Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops Clothing Line also sponsors the Twitter question at the end that we will get to. Let's start with some intrigue from the front office, John.
Yeah. So last week, there was a bit of really interesting news, I think, Jim, that came out, and we reported at The Athletic that Sachin Gupta, who had been with the Timberwolves front office for 5 years, certainly had an eventful stay here over these last 5 years, is leaving the Timberwolves front office to join the Chelsea Football Club in London, and so in the Premier League, and it's a really interesting pivot for Gupta. He is, obviously kind of been at the forefront of the analytics and strategic kind of movement in the NBA that's really over the last 10 to 15 years has really kind of had front offices adapting and changing to the way they analyze basketball, the way they think about basketball. And Gupta was kind of one of the on the vanguard of that trend with Daryl Morey and Sam Hinkie and everyone. Comes to Minnesota with Gerson Rosas, goes about rebuilding or retooling the Timberwolves roster, then steps in an interim role, leading the front office for a year, and then spent the last 2 years working under Tim Connolly before, kind of going to an entirely different sport, to an entirely different country. And he is going to be joining that franchise, kind of one of the most famous, I think, soccer clubs in the world. And I think he's going to be sort of revamping and looking at new ways to bring analytics to soccer. So, really interesting move for him, and a very interesting stay that he had here with the Timberwolves over the last 5 years.
Do you think analytics transfer sport to sport, or do you really need to be an expert in your sport?
So it's a great question. And I don't know, Jim, really, because, you can certainly make an argument that I think that the analytically inclined, like Sachin Gupta, have ways of sort of just examining issues or sports or whatever and looking at them critically and coming up with questions to ask and answers to search for that probably can transcend a given topic. But I would imagine that, his background in the NBA, he had been in the league for 18 years, and his familiarity with the game, with, the things like the collective bargaining agreement and things that go into making trades and all of that stuff. I mean, all of that institutional knowledge really did help him with the Timberwolves, with the Sixers, with the Pistons, with the Rockets, all these teams that he's worked for. So I think that he certainly is not going to have that kind of background with soccer. And so how he goes about kind of examining and trying to like look for advantages that analytics can create is going to be a real challenge. My guess is that's kind of one of the things that really intrigues him about this, is that it is an entirely new field. It's an entirely new set of parameters that he needs to kind of familiarize himself with and work with. We've seen a few instances, Jim, I think, of crossover in, in professional sports. I know that the Cleveland Browns hired Paul DePodesta, the baseball analytics guru. I think those results have been mixed so far, to say the least. I'm sure there's a few others that kind of have come from one sport and come to the other and taken a crack at it. Certainly there's, definitely some just the data background is you would think it requires less expertise, but at the same time, just given the depth of some of these statistics and trends that are and models that are being built, I would imagine that it would help to have just a real immersive idea of the game, the league, the players, all of that stuff. And but it's clear that Chelsea really, I think, is intrigued by going out of the box and thinking in a different way and seeing if some fresh eyes and a new perspective can help them. And that's what Gupta is going to be tasked with doing.
And how big a loss is this for the Wolves?
It's certainly a loss. Absolutely. He was, as Tim Connolly came in and he brought in some of his own people into the front office, Matt Lloyd, Del Demps, John Wallace, some of his guys that he's kind of surrounded himself with. I think that it's fair to say that Gupta certainly went down the org chart in terms of level of influence. But he still was heading the analytics department. And he was tasked with kind of trying to, even right before Connolly had arrived and Gupta was in command, he was starting to build out the analytics department to one of the more robust staffs in the league. And so he had influence and he changed the way that this front office looked, with some of his decisions and some of his staffing. And when you think about his role with this team after Gerson Rosas was fired abruptly right before training camp began, part of that was because Gupta and several other members of the front office and the organization had reservations about Rosas's leadership style and decisions that he was making. And so when a team fires a general manager like days before training camp opens, it's chaotic. Everyone is looking for leadership and looking to figure things out. And Gupta stepped into that breach with Chris Finch and helped stabilize the situation. They made the playoffs that year. And so he was very valuable to the organization in that role. But I do think it is fair to say that as Connolly got here, I do think that Gupta was no longer the number 2 in command that he was under Rosas, and certainly wasn't the number 1 that he was in the interim when he had the interim role. So that level of influence that did wane a little as these last 2 years went on, but he's still he's a very experienced executive. He has a lot of expertise in analytics and strategy. And so I think it's a loss. But I don't think that the Timberwolves have immediate plans to replace that role, in terms of like a marquee analytics hire or analytics kind of leader. And so, I think they're going to kind of go about things as is, status quo, with the rest of their front office and keep building this team and try and move forward.
Interesting. All right. I want to get to Jason Tatum, Chris Finch, Jaden McDaniels, and the amazing Lynx that we're watching right now. We're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Service Studios. Want to remind you, we have just a great lineup. I think the best lineup in Minnesota. We have John on basketball. John and I do the Viking Update Show, giving you a writer's view of the Vikings. Jeff Diamond, the former Vikings general manager, gives you the inside view of the Vikings from the salary cap and how things actually work. We have Russo on hockey with LaPanta. We have Gorg on hockey with the Bar Down Beauties on hockey. Roy Smalley, Lavelle Eniel, myself on baseball. John Millay on preps, Mike Grimm on Gophers, Randy Shaver's new high school football show and YouTube show is a big hit, and he's got some exclusive stuff coming up you should check out. And as I always say, we have so many good shows. Sometimes I leave some out because I can't remember them all. We also have great outdoor content, and we keep growing. Thank you for listening. We do appreciate it. Now let's thank the people who will make this show possible, starting with Princeton's Liquors.
Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove. Bill Princeton, the Princeton family have been in the liquor business for decades and decades. They are a part of this community. They've been here forever. Go to Princeton's Liquors, especially, you can get whatever you want there, but especially kind of two of their areas of expertise, craft beers, wonderful selection of craft beers, all sorts of different varieties. You'll find something that surprises you every time you kind of peruse their selection, something you haven't tried before that will, just be a nice little conversation starter when you show up at a party or at a bonfire or something with something brand new that nobody's ever heard of. You can find it at Princeton's Liquors with their craft beer. They also really are proud of their bourbon selection, high end, some of the best bourbon that you're going to find in the upper Midwest. And there's both the more affordable and the very high end, super expensive stuff if you have something really special to celebrate. So go to Princeton's Liquors. Bill Princeton has been a part of the Timberwolves and Lynx family. He was an intern there. He wore the crunch costume. He's been a supporter of ours for a very long time. And tell him the Jon Krawczynski Show sent you. Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove.
Thanks also to Steve Terry, our longest running sponsor. TSR Injury Law, you know the deal by now. The billboards are everywhere. The pictures of Naz Reid are everywhere. We've just had a blast with Steve. But the important thing is, if you ever are actually injured, you're going to need good, immediate help, ethical help, expert help. And that's what TSR Injury Law can give you. If you call them, they will help you out or they will point you in the right direction. They will not charge you unless they win your case. And guess what? Those billboards are expensive. They're able to get all those billboards. They're able to advertise here and elsewhere because they win a lot of cases and they've become a great Minnesota success story. So remember, 612-TSR-TIME, 612-TSR-TIME. Just call the number. Call them now. Thank them later. Let's get into an interesting thing Jason Tatum said about his playoff expectations last year.
Yeah, this is just kind of like I saw it on social media just this morning, actually. And Jason Tatum from the Celtics was doing an interview about, kind of last season, looking back on it. And one thing that he said was that the Celtics were really sort of eyeing the Denver Nuggets as the team that they thought matched up best against them in a potential final series as the playoffs were just beginning and starting to play out. And so when the Timberwolves beat the Nuggets in the second round, Tatum said that he kind of figured that they really had the championship, the title in the bag because he didn't see anyone else that was going to get in their way. And, whether he's right or wrong about that, I do think that as we get close to the start of a new season, we're recording this on Monday, 1 week away from Media Day. It's going to start ramping up. Everyone is going to start looking ahead at what this next season means, what the Wolves have to do to remain in contention and go further than they did last year, and all of the things about the upcoming season. There's going to be ample coverage for it. But I just thought that comment sort of opened the door a little bit just to reflect briefly on exactly what the Timberwolves did accomplish by beating the Nuggets in 7 games, coming back from 20 down in game 7 on the road to win that and dethrone those champions. Even though the Nuggets, it looked like by the end of that series had hit a bit of a physical wall, I think that, what the Wolves were able to do to them to force them into that situation just deserves a little bit of more acknowledgement. I mean, I've seen some of the highlights again have come up on social media over the last couple of weeks, especially of that run in game 7. And you just kind of think back to how much fun that was and how amazingly impressive it was that they were able to pull that off after falling behind 3-2 in the series and all of that. So, it was just a really, really cool thing. And just, Tatum's words kind of underscored just like that was a momentous victory for the Timberwolves to get there. And it didn't end the way everyone wanted when they were summarily dismissed by the Mavericks in the conference finals. But man, what a series. And that game 7 will certainly stick with me for a long time.
No doubt. I have a very bold statement. to make about that series. We'll get to it in 1 second. One reminder, one of the shows I didn't mention first time around, Don Mitchell's show, which is great for Lynx coverage as well as everything else. We highlight women in sports, women's sports, but we also talk Vikings and other sports. Check that out, Dawn of Sports. Also want to let you know that we have a very satisfied client of one of our next sponsors, Chew Vision Institute.
Yeah, that satisfied client is me. I went to Chew Vision Institute in the summertime. Actually, it was kind of towards the end of the playoffs, and got a consultation and was considering doing LASIK surgery. My prescription for my glasses was up. It was about time for me to re-up again, and I just thought, do I want to go through another $400 or $500 for glasses and contacts, new glasses, new frames, all of those things? Or do I really want to just be done with all this and try to have LASIK surgery? I've had a lot of friends that have had it, and they've all said how great it was. And I was always just kind of rolling my eyes at it and be like, it can't be that great. Well, I went through it with Chew Vision in Bloomington, and I just have to tell you, it is that great. Not having to deal with the hassle of contacts and eyeglasses for the last 2 months now has been incredibly freeing. Dr. Chew at Chew Vision, all of his staff are incredibly welcoming and friendly. Dr. Chew himself was just great when I went through the very brief surgery. It only lasted 4 or 5 minutes to get the surgery done. And then by the next day, I was seeing clearly 20/20 vision. Everything was different. Now I have people walking up to me telling me that I look younger. I don't know if they're just gassing me up or not, but I feel just great, by doing it. I'm so glad that I did it. I wish I would have done it 10 years ago. Go to chewvision.com to set up a consultation. Go in, they will give you an evaluation and see if LASIK is right for you, or if there is another option that is out there for your vision correction. Chew Vision Institute in Bloomington.
Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line has been sponsoring the show and a Twitter question on each show for a while now. And John knows the people behind Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line.
Yeah, Jordan and Craig at sglambchops.com. They've really kind of built this clothing company into just a great place locally for the best casual wear that you could find. Sweatpants, hoodies, t-shirts, hats, anything that you want to remain comfortable in and just lounging around the house, or it's stylish enough to go out on the town, meet up with your friends for some drinks or something, and just kind of hanging out, watching some football, on a Monday night or something like that. But if you go to sglambchops.com, put in the promo code JONK20, you'll get 20% off anything that you buy there. Again, the most comfortable and the best shorts I've ever owned are from Lamb Chops. I love their hoodies. They're super high quality. They are affordable. And it's stuff that will last you a long time and will look good for a very long time as well. So go to sglambchops.com. The promo code is JONK20 for 20% off anything you buy at Lamb Chops.
So I think that victory in Game 7, that series victory, lacking home court advantage against the defending champs, was the high point in Timberwolves history. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do. It was, I think, the biggest comeback in a Game 7 in NBA history. They're down 20 early in the third quarter. They had been in this it was a weird series where they win the first 2 games and it looks like they're just going to completely dominate and run away with this thing. Then they drop the games at home. And drop one more against Denver, and you're down 3-2 all of a sudden. Then so there's just a lot of twists and turns in the series, but that game in and of itself, you go into the defending champion's house with the MVP of the league in Nikola Jokic. And not only do you kind of overcome that huge deficit that you faced, but they ended up essentially kind of running away with the game. By about 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they're up 10, and the number of Wolves fans that were in that arena and absolutely making their voices heard was incredible for that kind of a scenario, Jim. I mean, it was absolutely the high point. I mean, you also look at Game 7 against Sacramento in 2004 and Kevin Garnett and how amazing he was. It was great. That was an incredible performance, an incredible game, but that was at home against Sacramento, which was a very good team back then, but not the defending champions, not with the MVP of the league on their team. And so to do this on the road, coming back from that deficit against the champs with the MVP, it was remarkable. It was, to me, like, I cannot imagine the Timberwolves ever topping that kind of a victory unless they're in the finals and they win a championship. That's how impressive that was for me.
So Britt Robson did a Q&A with Chris Finch. What interesting came out of that?
Yeah, so Britt does a great job with these at MinPost as kind of a table setter for the season. Every year he sits down with the head coach and they go through all sorts of different topics. So I recommend you checking it out at minpost.com. But I think one thing that really did kind of jump out to me that Chris Finch did mention, we've talked a lot, Jim, about kind of what they need to do to kind of boost their offense. They were number 1 in defense last season. They were 17th in offense, and that gap has to close dramatically if they want to stay in contention in the West and if they want to try to go to the finals. And so there's all sorts of different things that Finch does get into in the conversation with Britt. But two things really did jump out. But number one, first and foremost, was that Finch said that he really does need to find ways to get Jaden McDaniels more involved offensively. And it is a difficult thing to do because you have Anthony Edwards, you have Karl Anthony Towns, Mike Conley has the ball in his hands a lot, Rudy Gobert still wants his touches. And so it's often that McDaniels can sort of just float out of the picture. And I think that after seeing how effective that he was in the playoffs last year, I think it maybe opened the coaching staff's eyes to the possibilities of McDaniels kind of serving as a real source of offensive juice when they need it in transition and in the half court. He really had a tough time in the regular season shooting the 3-point shot. He looked lost at times in terms of trying to find his way and where he could be effective and where he could get his opportunities offensively. And he took a step back in that regard in what year number 4 for him. But when you got to the playoffs, he was much more assertive. He was much more aggressive. They took advantage of some of the mismatches that he created because a lot of times the opponent will put their best defender on Jaden McDaniel, or their worst defender, on Jaden McDaniels because they have so many other things to worry about with the Timberwolves half-court offense. And McDaniels was really, really good. Shot the ball really well, but not just catch and shoot threes, but also kind of creating his own shots, going to the basket and pulling up in the paint or right around the free throw line in the elbow was really effective for him. And so if they can find a way to get McDaniels more involved, use his efficiency, kind of take advantage of those mismatches, that could be a real sort of pick me up for the offense, and put more stress on the defense so that they cannot load up on Ant and Cat, and they have to give more attention all around the floor. And so Chris Finch kind of identifying that pre-training camp as a priority, I think does say a lot about the confidence that he has in Jaden McDaniels. Cause I don't know that was always there. I think that Finch, certainly has an enormous amount of respect for McDaniels as a defender, and thought that there's potential offensively, but I just don't know that he was at a point prior to the playoffs last season of really believing that McDaniels could be a sustainable, reliable offensive threat. And it sounds like he believes that now. So that could that could mean, more opportunities for Jaden, and maybe that does help jumpstart the offense a little bit more.
Quickly on the Lynx, Don Mitchell and I talk a lot about the Lynx. We'll do so again this week. They finish a stunning regular season, second seed in a very difficult league. And then Cheryl Reeve wins Coach of the Year. Collier wins Defensive Player of the Year. It's pretty remarkable what they've done here. They're basically winning at the same rate as their championship teams, and they have one potential Hall of Famer instead of 5 on the roster. It's just been stunning. We're talking here on Monday. They can close out Phoenix on Wednesday night. I admit, I thought they were an admirable team all year. I didn't think they were this good.
Yeah, I think the most fun as a fan is those unexpectedly great seasons that come out of nowhere. The Vikings are having that start right now. And I think that this Lynx season certainly qualifies, because there's two things that really, I think, that you factor in to the surprise level of the Lynx really asserting themselves as the clear-cut second best team in the WNBA, and a team that can reasonably say that they can win a championship because they beat the best team in the league 3 out of 4 times. So, but I think that when you look at it coming into the season, you knew that Nafisa Collier was a great player. Absolutely. She's been on the Olympics, been an all-star, been very productive in this league for a long time. But she really made a leap this year into super duper stardom, into, the absolutely an MVP caliber player. Asia Wilson was understandably the unanimous MVP. She's the best player. But Collier making people have a conversation at least about her in that race is a little surprising, but just also very, very impressive. And then 38 points in game 1 against Phoenix was just jaw-dropping. I mean, because she's the defensive player of the year, but she's also a devastating offensive player. And so that's been really fun to watch. But then also you looked at this team and you said, Lynx fans are used to, at their height, Hall of Fame players all over the floor. Great, best of the best, unbelievable starting lineups with some depth. And they just, they just overwhelmed opponents with the sheer talent that they had at their disposal. This team is different in that they have really good players. Collier's great. McBride, Courtney Williams. You have a lot of real talent, but not the same level of household name with all of these players. And so you get this feeling of it's a team that has to play together as a team to maximize themselves. And they've done that all season long. And that is just so satisfying, just as a fan of the game of basketball, to see a team play this way, the way that the Lynx play defensively, the way that they share the ball offensively. It's so much fun. And, they had a little scare in game 1. They get up big early and the Sun come back and take the lead in the fourth quarter, but they survived it. But still, they're in great shape to go forward. And, this is a team that can win it all. Like, that has to be stated. Like, this is absolutely a team that can win the whole dang thing.
No doubt about it. It's been a blast to watch and just beautiful basketball. All right, let's get to our Twitter question brought to you by Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me find it here. I lost it for a second. It's from Jeff Pryor, and I'm just pulling it up here. Just lost my spot. Yeah, here it is. With Woj retiring, will there be a shift back to a more traditional news-breaking model in the NBA spread across local reporters, or will a super insider, Shams or someone else, emerge to fill the void? And so this kind of gets back to the surprising announcement last week that Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN is retiring from the news business. He's going to be the general manager of the basketball team at St. Bonaventure at his alma mater. And I just thought that this question from Jeff was kind of like a good entry point into talking about Woj's influence and career, because it was as influential and as game changing as any journalist, sports journalist, I should say, has had, in my lifetime, because Woj almost single-handedly turned the way the league was covered into that news breaking model that Jeff is talking about. And, it's not hyperbole to say that the league will be different without sort of Woj lording over things. And, he and I competed all the time for breaking news. Certainly it was frustrating at times. Certainly it was, challenging at times to kind of butt heads that way. I always have great respect for him, and we have a great relationship, but it was a monster to deal with, like in terms of, the competition of breaking news, when you're going to work in the same story that he was. But I don't know that it will change. The question will be who is filling it, because there is no other Woj other than Shams, my guy. Shams Charania at The Athletic is very, very good and has that same sort of relentless and I think almost crazy personality that you have to do that job at the level that those two guys have done it. There will be others that come along that try to mimic it, just because that's the sort of the ecosystem that has been created. But I think it's clearly now, Shams is clearly the lead dog. He's the number one. They were competing and going at each other for a long time. And, ESPN will hire someone or will elevate someone, and there will be competition, no doubt. But the Woj Shams battles were something entirely different. And it's going to be just a different league without him around. So, just kind of a wild development to see that happen last week. And, I'm still surprised that he actually did it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I just think those jobs have to lend themselves to burnout, don't they? I mean, you're on your phone just 20 hours a day. You're working all hours. You're up against top competition. I'll share this. I think it was the Beijing Olympics, maybe it was London. So I'm not sure on the timing, but I remember I was sitting next to Woj, who I knew and liked, and I'm sitting next to Woj, and probably Beijing, because it was like Twitter had just become a thing, and I was really resisting getting on social media. I didn't like social media. I was right about that, but now, even though I'm on it now, and I'm sitting next to Woj, and he is spending the entire game on Twitter breaking news. And I once he sat there and had a conversation with him, okay, how does this work? How do you get credit for that? Is that good for your publication that you're basically doing all your work on social media? He said, oh, this is the way of the future. This is how it's going to work. And of course, he was right about all of it but it was fascinating to sit there and basically watch the business change in real time, because the guy to my right was breaking so much news on social media that he blew up the industry model.
Yeah, Woj saw things before they happened several times. Number one, when he was a columnist, at the Bergen Record, and then a general sports columnist, and then he moved to Yahoo to cover the NBA, and specialize in the NBA. There was a lot of people that questioned that, because he left what was at the time like the plum job of all jobs. The one you have, Jim, now, and then he went to Yahoo and like this kind of fledgling internet startup, and what was going to happen. You're covering the NBA, and then he flourished there, and then he got onto Twitter early and was like, this is the way of the future. Now, me personally, like as a reporter, and as a storyteller, I don't like what Twitter has done to the news business. I wish that we had more value for like the full stories with details and really telling kind of the full picture, rather than these tweets that people just go crazy over. But this is what the audience has wanted. And so Woj and Shams have really adapted to that in a major way, and saw it before it was really becoming a thing. And they both profited. Like, I think the report is that Woj left 3 years and $21 million on the table to walk away, and like that kind of money for a journalist is just like, it's insane. So but I will say too, like, I have broken a lot of stories on the Timberwolves over the years. And when you do it, when you are the first one out there, first of all, it's very like nerve wracking because making sure you have it right, you get out. But then when you break something big, like a really big story, you get messages and calls and texts from all over the league, people wanted to talk about it and things like that. And your whole day is like just, you're just like deluged by, interview requests but then just like other GMs and coaches and players and stuff reach out. It's like, wow, how'd you get that? What happened? What's really going on? And all I think about in those moments is that Woj and Shams do this for 30 teams in the league. And I just cannot imagine what it takes bandwidth wise to do that job like that. And, some people do complain maybe about some of the tactics that some of them use or whatever. And I've always just been like, look, the reason they are where they are is because they have decided to devote their entire lives to that pursuit. I am not willing to do that. And that's choices. We all can make those choices, but I'm not going to be lamenting their success because I'm not willing to go as far as they were to do it. But I just try to do the job as best I can with these Timberwolves and do it the way that I think provides value. But there is no arguing that Woj literally did change the entire basketball reporting industry with the way that he went about things. And, he's a absolute legend. And I'm glad he's making this decision on his own terms and gets to do something where maybe he'll be able to ramp back a little bit and enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah. Well said. Congrats to Woj. Thanks for the good stuff, John. Thanks to everyone who listens to the Jon Krawczynski Show. Please check out the Viking Update Show. Check out everything at the network. It's all great stuff. We have just tremendous people, and we appreciate you being on the ride that we're on right now, building this company out. For Jon Krawczynski, for our producers, I'm Jim Suhan. Thanks for listening to TalkNorth.com.